Tom was a cheerful boy who loved to imagine big things in small places. He was only 9 years old, but his mind was filled with ideas that could keep him busy all day. He loved drawing, building, and creating little adventures out of ordinary objects. His parents often smiled when they saw him sitting with a box of wooden blocks, arranging them into castles or forts. One day, while sitting in the backyard and looking at the tall tree that stood near the fence, Tom had a new idea. He wanted a treehouse. The tree was strong and tall, with branches spreading out like open arms. Tom loved sitting under it to read his books or to watch the birds that perched on its branches. To him, it was already special, but he thought it could become even more magical if he could climb into it and have a little space of his own. He could imagine himself sitting up high, watching the sky turn from blue to gold in the evenings, or pretending that the treehouse was a pirate ship, a secret fort, or a lookout tower. When he told his dad about the idea, his eyes lit up. His dad was a kind man who always encouraged Tom's creativity. He knelt down, smiled, and said, "That sounds like a wonderful plan, Tom. Maybe we can work on it together." Tom jumped with excitement. Building the treehouse became a dream they both wanted to bring to life. The very next weekend, Tom and his dad gathered some old wooden boards, a hammer, and nails. His mom watched from the porch with a smile, reminding them to be careful. Tom held the boards while his dad hammered them into place. The sound of the hammer echoed in the quiet neighborhood, and soon a small platform started to take shape. Tom climbed up the tree, holding onto the trunk, while his dad guided him carefully. It wasn't finished yet, but already Tom felt like he was standing on top of the world. Each day after school, Tom would rush home, drop his bag on the floor, and run straight to the backyard. His dad often joined him, but even when his dad was busy, Tom would sit near the tree and dream about how the finished treehouse would look. He wanted a little window to peek out from, a small shelf for his books, and maybe even a rope ladder. He would tell his mom all about his plans during dinner, and she would laugh at his excitement. Neighbors sometimes walked by and saw the work in progress. Many of them smiled and admired the effort. A few even stopped to chat with Tom's dad and said it was nice to see a child enjoying the outdoors rather than spending all his time on screens. Some of the kids in the neighborhood grew curious too. They asked Tom if they could play inside once it was done, and Tom happily agreed. For him, the treehouse was not just his own hideout but a place he wanted to share with friends. But not everyone was pleased. Across the street lived Mrs. Karen, who was the head of the homeowners association. She was known for being strict about rules. She often walked around the neighborhood with her clipboard, checking for lawns that weren't trimmed or fences that needed repair. Some neighbors respected her for her dedication, but others felt she was too strict about small things. When she first noticed Tom's treehouse taking shape, she frowned. To her, it looked untidy and unnecessary. Karen stood at her window and watched as Tom and his dad continued building. She muttered to herself, convinced that the treehouse would bring down the look of the neighborhood. But Tom, full of joy and innocence, had no idea what she was thinking. For him, every board nailed into place was a step closer to his dream. One Saturday morning, Tom woke up early and hurried outside with his dad. They painted the boards with leftover paint from the garage, turning the plain wood into a bright little shelter. Tom carefully brushed the paint on, his hands getting messy, but he didn't mind at all. His dad built a small railing to keep him safe, while Tom added a piece of cloth for a curtain. By the afternoon, the treehouse looked cozy and full of charm. Tom sat inside with a book in his lap. The warm sunlight streamed through the little curtain, and he felt like he was in a world of his own. He could hear birds chirping and the wind rustling through the leaves. It was peaceful, and Tom's heart swelled with happiness. His mom brought him a sandwich and a glass of juice, placing them carefully on a small tray. "You've made something wonderful here, Tom," she said softly. He grinned and said, "It's my castle, my reading spot, and my secret base all in one." His parents laughed, proud of his imagination. Evenings became special for Tom. He would climb into the treehouse, watch the sunset, and sometimes wave at neighbors who passed by. Some waved back with warm smiles, appreciating the boy's joy. The treehouse became a symbol of childhood wonder in the neighborhood, a reminder that simple dreams could bring great happiness. But inside her house, Karen grew more uneasy each day. She did not share the same joy as others. The sight of the treehouse, painted and decorated, made her believe rules were being broken. She decided she would have to do something about it. For now, she stayed quiet, only writing notes on her clipboard, but in her mind, a plan was forming. Tom, however, remained blissfully unaware of any trouble. In his heart, the treehouse was the safest and happiest place he could imagine. He didn't know that challenges were waiting just around the corner. For him, the dream had only begun. Tom's treehouse soon became the brightest part of his days. Every morning he would run to the backyard, climb the little ladder his dad had made, and sit in his new space with a smile on his face. Sometimes he read his books there. Sometimes he used his small notebook to draw pictures of birds and clouds. On other days, he pretended it was a fort, guarding the neighborhood from imaginary pirates or dragons. To Tom, the treehouse was not just wood and nails. It was a dream he had built with his father, and it made him feel proud. The neighbors often passed by and noticed how much joy the treehouse brought to the boy. A few even stopped to look. Mrs. Green, who lived next door, smiled one evening and said, "Tom, you are lucky to have such a wonderful place. When I was your age, I always wanted a treehouse too." Tom beamed with pride and told her that she could come see it anytime. Children from the block grew curious and sometimes asked if they could play inside. Tom never said no. He loved the idea of sharing his happiness. But not everyone felt the same way. From her window across the street, Mrs. Karen continued to watch. Each time she saw Tom climbing up into the treehouse, her frown deepened. She was the head of the homeowners association, and she felt it was her duty to keep the neighborhood in perfect order. In her mind, the treehouse was not charming. It was not creative. Instead, she thought of it as a structure that did not belong. She believed it made the street look less neat. And because she was so focused on rules and appearances, she forgot about the joy it brought to Tom. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky glowed orange, Karen walked across the street with her usual clipboard in hand. Tom was inside the treehouse, pretending to be a captain steering his ship, when he heard the sound of voices below. His mom had opened the front door, and Karen was standing there. Karen spoke in her usual firm voice. "This treehouse is not allowed," she said. "It goes against the rules of the neighborhood. It must be taken down." Tom's mom tried to stay calm. She explained kindly, "It is only a small treehouse, and it is safe. Tom enjoys it very much, and it is built on our own property. We have made sure it is secure and neat." But Karen shook her head. "Rules are rules. I am in charge of making sure everyone follows them. If one family builds something, then others will do the same. Soon this place will look messy." Tom's dad, who had just stepped outside, joined the conversation. With respect, the treehouse is harmless. It does not bother anyone. It brings joy to our child, and it is made with care. Surely a little happiness is worth more than strict rules. Karen's face grew tight. She tapped her pen against her clipboard. I will give you 1 week. If the treehouse is not removed by then, I will take action. You may think it is harmless, but I will not allow this neighborhood to become untidy. With that, she turned and walked away, her shoes clicking against the pavement. Tom, who had heard every word from above, felt his heart sink. He had never thought someone would want to take away his treehouse. When his mom looked up at him, she saw the worry on his face. She smiled gently and said, "Don't worry, Tom. We will work this out. The treehouse is yours, and we will do our best to keep it." His dad added, "Sometimes people only see rules, not happiness. But happiness matters too. You should not lose hope." That night, Tom lay in bed thinking about Karen's words. The treehouse had been his dream, and the thought of losing it made him sad. He stared at the ceiling, remembering all the afternoons he had spent reading in his little hideout. He remembered the laughter of his friends when they climbed up to join him. Could all of that really be taken away just because one person did not like it? The next morning, Tom went outside early. He climbed up into the treehouse and sat quietly. The birds were singing, and the air was fresh, but he could not enjoy it fully. His heart felt heavy. He thought about what might happen if the treehouse disappeared. It was not only wood and paint. It was a gift from his dad, a place built with love. Losing it would mean losing a part of himself. Later that day, Mrs. Green stopped by again. She noticed Tom's worried face and asked what was wrong. When he explained, she sighed. "I am sorry, Tom. Sometimes people forget that joy matters. But you must remember, many of us in the neighborhood think your treehouse is wonderful. You are not alone." Her words gave Tom a little comfort. He realized that even if Karen was against the treehouse, others appreciated it. Still, the fear lingered in his mind. As the week went by, Tom's family tried to carry on as usual. His dad checked the treehouse to make sure it was safe and stable. His mom made him snacks to eat up in his hideout. Tom invited a couple of friends over, and they played games pretending the treehouse was a castle under attack. For a while, he could forget about the warning. But whenever he saw Karen walking by with her clipboard, the worry returned. Finally, the week came to an end. Tom's family had not taken down the treehouse, because they believed it was unfair to do so. They hoped Karen would change her mind or simply let it be. But deep down, Tom had a feeling that she would not stop so easily. He could sense that trouble was waiting just around the corner. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the street grew quiet, Tom sat in his treehouse and watched the last light fade from the sky. He hugged his knees to his chest and whispered to himself, "Please don't take my treehouse." It was his special place, his dream come true, and he could not imagine life without it. What Tom did not know was that the next step Karen would take would change everything. The morning began like any other. The sun was shining, the air was gentle, and Tom's heart was light as he climbed into his treehouse with a book in hand. The treehouse had become part of his daily life. He read there, he played there, and sometimes he even did his homework there. It was a quiet place where his thoughts could fly free, just like the birds that rested on the branches nearby. But in another house across the street, Karen was preparing for something different. She had spent the past week thinking about the treehouse. She had watched as Tom's family ignored her warning. Each day she saw Tom happily sitting in his wooden hideout, and each day her frown grew deeper. To her, it was not joy she saw. She saw a broken rule, a structure she believed did not belong in the neighborhood. And on this day, she decided she would take matters into her own hands. Tom had no idea what was coming. He was sitting cross-legged on the small wooden floor, turning the pages of his favorite adventure book. In his imagination, the treehouse was a castle on a mountain, and he was a brave knight guarding the land. He felt safe, happy, and free. Down below, his mom was watering the flowers in the garden. Everything seemed calm. Then Karen walked across the street. She was holding a small bag of tools she had gathered from her garage. She looked determined. Without knocking on the door or speaking to Tom's parents, she marched into the backyard. Tom heard the sound of footsteps on the grass and peeked out from the little curtain. When he saw her, his heart skipped a beat. Karen did not look up at him. Instead, she went straight to the base of the tree and began pulling at one of the boards. The sound of wood creaking filled the air. Tom's eyes widened in shock. He called out, "Stop, please, that is my treehouse." His small voice trembled, but Karen did not listen. She kept tugging at the wood as if she had the right to take it apart. Tom leaned forward, trying to see what she was doing. His hands gripped the wooden railing his dad had built. Suddenly, the tree shook slightly from her force. Tom lost his balance and slipped. He grabbed at the side, but his arm scraped against a nail. The sting made him cry out in pain. He managed to sit back down, holding his arm with tears welling in his eyes. His mom, who had been busy with the flowers, dropped her watering can and ran toward the tree. "Tom, what happened?" she shouted. She looked up and saw him clutching his arm, his face twisted in pain. Then she saw Karen standing by the tree, one of the boards half loose in her hands. Her heart filled with disbelief. "How could you do this?" Tom's mom cried, rushing forward to help her son down. She carefully guided him out of the treehouse and checked his arm. It was a scrape, red and sore, but thankfully not too deep. Still, the sight of her child hurt because someone had meddled with his safe place filled her with anger and fear. Karen, instead of apologizing, stepped back and raised her chin. "This is exactly what I warned about. The treehouse is unsafe. See, the child already got hurt." Tom's dad, who had just come out after hearing the commotion, stared at her in shock. "Unsafe? He got hurt because you came into our yard and started pulling it apart without permission. You had no right." Karen's face tightened. She quickly pulled out her phone. "I will call the authorities. You are not following the rules, and now your child is injured because of it. This is what happens when people ignore the association." Tom's mom gasped. "You cannot be serious. You caused this. You should be helping, not blaming." She held Tom close while his dad hurried inside to get the first aid kit. Karen spoke sharply into her phone, explaining to someone that there was a problem in the neighborhood. She claimed she was only doing her duty and that the treehouse was dangerous. Tom sat on the porch steps, his arm bandaged by his dad, his eyes wide with confusion. He did not understand why someone would call for help when all he wanted was to enjoy his little house in the tree. Soon the sound of sirens reached the street. 2 deputies arrived in their car and stepped out. Neighbors, curious about the noise, gathered near their fences to see what was happening. Tom sat quietly while his mom explained the situation. She showed the deputies his scraped arm and pointed to the half-loosened boards on the treehouse. She told them how Karen had entered their yard without asking and started to tear it down. Several neighbors nodded in agreement. Mrs. Green stepped forward and said, "I saw her walk right into their backyard. She did not knock, she did not ask. She went straight to the tree and started pulling things off. That boy was sitting there reading before she arrived." The deputies turned to Karen. "Is this true?" one of them asked calmly. Karen crossed her arms. "I was doing my duty as the head of the homeowners association. The rules are clear. The treehouse is not allowed. It is unsafe, and now you can see for yourself. The child was injured." The deputies exchanged a look. One of them spoke firmly. "Rules do not give you the right to walk into someone else's yard and destroy their property. That is trespassing. And the injury happened because you interfered. This is not your responsibility. It is theirs." Karen's face paled slightly, but she shook her head. "You do not understand. I was protecting the neighborhood." The deputy replied, "Protecting the neighborhood does not mean ignoring the rights of others. There are proper ways to handle disputes. What you did was not proper." Tom's parents stood close to him, relieved that someone was finally speaking the truth. The neighbors whispered among themselves, many shaking their heads at Karen's behavior. For the first time, Karen seemed uncertain. She lowered her phone and looked around, realizing she did not have the support she thought she had. The deputies continued to ask questions, carefully writing notes. They took statements from Tom's parents, from Mrs. Green, and from others who had witnessed the scene. All the while, Tom sat quietly, holding his mom's hand. His arm still hurt, but what hurt more was the fear that his treehouse might be gone forever. When the deputies finally finished their notes, they asked Tom's parents to take him inside to rest. They assured them that the matter would be handled properly. Karen was told to stay where she was until they had finished speaking with everyone. The air in the neighborhood was tense, but for Tom, there was a small sense of comfort. Someone had listened. Someone had noticed what really happened. That night, Tom lay in bed, his arm neatly bandaged, and thought about the day. His treehouse, once a place of peace, had become the center of trouble. He did not know what would happen next, but he hoped the truth would shine through. He closed his eyes, holding on to one wish, that his treehouse would survive and that no one would ever try to take it away again. The sound of voices in the street grew louder as more neighbors stepped outside to see what was happening. Some stood by their fences, while others walked to the sidewalk, curious about the police car parked in front of Tom's house. The flashing lights made the quiet neighborhood feel tense, as if something very serious had taken place. Tom sat on the porch with his mom holding his hand. His dad stood close, trying to stay calm while keeping an eye on Karen, who still stood near the tree with her clipboard pressed against her chest. The deputies walked across the lawn, their steps steady and professional. Both wore kind but serious expressions as they approached. The taller deputy spoke first. "Good evening, folks. We are here to understand what happened. Can someone explain from the beginning?" Tom's dad stepped forward politely. "Yes, sir. My son was sitting in his treehouse this afternoon when our neighbor, Mrs. Karen, entered our backyard without permission. She began pulling at the boards of the treehouse, and during the commotion, Tom lost his balance and scraped his arm. We have already cleaned and bandaged the scrape, but that is not the main issue. The issue is that she came onto our property and damaged something that belongs to us." The deputy nodded slowly, writing notes on a small pad. "I see. Thank you. And where is the child now?" Tom's mom gently pulled Tom closer. He is here. His arm is hurt, but he will be all right. It frightened him very much though. The deputy crouched down to Tom's level. His voice softened. Hey there, buddy. I am sorry you had a rough afternoon. Can you tell me what you saw? Tom's voice was small, but he answered honestly. I was reading my book in the treehouse. Then she came into the yard and started pulling the boards. The tree moved, and I slipped and hurt my arm. He held up his bandaged arm as proof. The deputy gave him a gentle smile. Thank you, that helps me understand. Now the other deputy turned to Karen. Ma'am, is this true? Did you enter their yard and touch the treehouse? Karen lifted her chin, trying to appear confident. Yes, I did. I am the head of the homeowners association. The rules of this neighborhood are clear. That treehouse should not exist. I gave them a warning, and they ignored it. So I came to deal with it myself. The injury proves I was right. The structure is unsafe. Several neighbors gasped at her words. Mrs. Green, who had been listening nearby, raised her voice. That is not true. The treehouse was safe. I saw the boy sitting quietly inside it before she started pulling it apart. He only got hurt because of her actions. Another neighbor, Mr. Lee, stepped forward. I agree. We all saw her walk in without permission. The treehouse is not harming anyone. It makes the boy happy. The deputies looked back at Karen. Their expressions were calm, but their eyes were firm. The taller one spoke again. Ma'am, even if you believed the treehouse was against association rules, you had no right to enter private property and damage it. That is trespassing and destruction of property. The injury happened because of your actions, not because of the structure itself. Karen's face turned red. She clutched her clipboard tightly and stammered, but I was only doing my duty. Someone has to keep order here. The deputy replied, keeping order does not mean breaking the law. If you had concerns, you should have contacted the proper authorities or taken it through the correct channels. Taking matters into your own hands and entering someone's yard without permission is not acceptable. The crowd of neighbors murmured in agreement. Tom's parents felt a small wave of relief. At last, someone was telling Karen what they had wanted to say all along. Karen tried to protest again. You do not understand. If rules are broken once, others will follow. Soon everyone will have tree houses or sheds or strange things in their yards. The neighborhood will lose its beauty. The deputy shook his head. Rules are meant to guide, but they are not meant to remove kindness and joy. This boy's treehouse is not a threat to anyone. What is a threat is ignoring the rights of others and making decisions that are not yours to make. Tom listened to every word. His small heart felt lighter with each sentence. For the first time since the trouble began, he believed his treehouse might be safe. The deputies took time to write down everything carefully. They asked Tom's dad to describe how the treehouse was built, and he explained that he had used safe boards, secured nails, and even added a railing to protect his son. They asked Tom's mom about what she saw, and she described how Karen had pulled at the wood without saying a word. Then they turned back to the neighbors. Mrs. Green and Mr. Lee both gave their statements, and others nodded in agreement. It was clear to the deputies that the entire neighborhood, except for Karen, supported Tom's family. Finally, the deputies spoke directly to Karen. Ma'am, based on what we have heard and seen, your actions today were not justified. We will have to file charges for trespassing and for damaging property. You will need to answer for your behavior." The words hung heavy in the air. Karen's eyes widened. She had expected to be supported, not corrected. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but no words came out. The neighborhood was silent, waiting. Tom's dad placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "It is all right, Tom," he whispered. "The truth is clear now." The deputies asked Karen to step aside while they finished their paperwork. One of them stayed with her while the other spoke again to Tom's family. "We are sorry for the trouble you faced today. You have every right to enjoy your property. We encourage you to keep the treehouse safe, but we see no problem with it being here." Tom's mom smiled with gratitude. "Thank you, officer. That means a lot to us." The deputies gave Tom a friendly pat on the shoulder before returning to their car. The neighbors slowly drifted back to their homes, still whispering about what they had witnessed. The flashing lights disappeared down the street, and the evening grew calm again. Tom sat quietly on the porch, his arm still sore but his spirit a little brighter. He looked at his treehouse, half damaged from Karen's interference, but still standing strong. In his heart, he knew it was more than just wood in a tree. It was a piece of his childhood, a place filled with dreams, and now it had become a symbol of something bigger, of standing up for what was right. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Tom whispered to himself, "My treehouse will stay." He believed it now more than ever. But deep inside, he also knew the story was not over. The treehouse would be rebuilt, stronger than before, and the neighborhood would never forget what had happened that day. The night after the deputies left was quiet. Tom's house felt calmer, though everyone was still shaken by what had happened. Tom's mom checked his arm once more before bedtime, making sure the bandage was clean. His dad sat with him and told him stories to ease his mind. Yet even with all the comfort, Tom kept thinking about the treehouse. He looked out his window at the dark outline of the tree and whispered to himself, "Stay strong, little house. Tomorrow will be better." The next morning brought a new light. Birds chirped as if nothing had happened, and the sun rose gently over the neighborhood. Tom walked to the backyard and stood in front of his treehouse. Some of the boards were loose where Karen had pulled at them. The railing leaned slightly to one side, and the curtain he had hung for a window was torn. His heart sank at the sight. But when his dad joined him, he placed a reassuring hand on Tom's shoulder. "Do not be sad, Tom," his dad said kindly. "This treehouse can be fixed. It is strong, and we can make it even stronger. What matters most is that you still have it." Tom nodded, wiping his eyes. He knew his dad was right. The treehouse was damaged but not gone. It could be repaired, and maybe it could even become better than before. Later that day, neighbors began to visit. Mrs. Green came first with a tray of cookies. She handed one to Tom and said warmly, "I am proud of you for being brave yesterday. Your treehouse is special, and many of us want to see it stay." Mr. Lee came next, bringing a box of nails and a small hammer. "I used to build things with my children," he said. "I thought you might need this." Soon more neighbors arrived, some carrying tools, others just bringing smiles. Word had spread quickly about what happened, and people wanted to help. Tom's backyard filled with kind faces, each ready to lend a hand. For the first time since the trouble began, Tom felt surrounded by support. Together, they began to rebuild. His dad climbed the ladder and tightened the boards. Mr. Lee hammered the loose railing back into place. Mrs. Green held the paintbrush and helped Tom paint over the scratches. Even the children from the neighborhood joined in, handing tools and cheering as the treehouse took shape again. The laughter of children and the sound of hammers filled the air. It was no longer just a project between Tom and his dad. It had become a project of the whole community. Tom worked too, carrying small nails and holding the board steady. He felt proud to be part of the rebuilding. With each nail hammered and each brush stroke of paint, his heart grew lighter. By the afternoon, the treehouse stood stronger and brighter than before. The railing was firm, the boards were secure, and the curtain was replaced with a colorful piece of fabric one neighbor had brought. When the work was done, everyone stepped back to admire the result. The treehouse looked cheerful, shining in the sunlight like a little wooden castle. Tom climbed up the ladder and waved from the small window. "Thank you, everyone," he called out. His voice was full of joy. "This is the best day ever." The neighbors clapped and cheered. Mrs. Green smiled at the others and said, "This is what community is about. Helping each other, not tearing things down." The crowd agreed, nodding their heads. Karen, however, watched all of this from across the street. She had been quiet since the deputies had spoken to her the day before. She did not come outside to help or to speak. She only stood at her window, her face unreadable. The neighborhood had made it clear that her actions were wrong, and for the first time, she felt out of place. As days passed, the deputy's report was filed. Karen was formally charged with trespassing and property damage. It was a serious moment for her, but one she could not escape. The deputies explained that her position in the association did not give her authority to act the way she had. The rules of the neighborhood were meant to guide, not to harm. Karen had to face the consequences of ignoring that truth. For Tom's family, however, life slowly returned to normal. The scrape on Tom's arm healed, leaving only a faint mark. Each day after school, Tom once again climbed into his treehouse, reading his books and imagining new adventures. Sometimes his friends joined him, pretending they were explorers or captains of a ship. Other times he simply sat quietly, looking at the sunset and feeling grateful. One weekend, Tom's parents organized a small gathering in the backyard. They invited all the neighbors who had helped rebuild the treehouse. There were sandwiches, fruit, and lemonade. Laughter filled the yard as children played and adults chatted. Tom climbed into the treehouse and looked down at everyone smiling below. In that moment, he realized something important. The treehouse was not just his dream anymore. It had become a symbol of kindness and unity for the entire neighborhood. That evening, when the gathering ended and the last guests had gone home, Tom's dad sat with him on the porch. "Do you see what happened, Tom?" he asked gently. "At first, the treehouse was just for you. But when trouble came, everyone came together to protect it. It became something greater than wood and nails. It became a reminder of how people should care for each other." Tom nodded slowly. "I understand, Dad. The treehouse is ours now. Not just mine, but everyone's." His mom smiled warmly. "Yes, and it will always remind you that even when someone tries to take away your joy, kindness and truth can bring it back." Tom leaned against his dad and watched the stars begin to twinkle in the sky. He felt safe, happy, and proud. The treehouse had survived, and so had his spirit. From that day on, the neighborhood carried a new sense of togetherness. The treehouse was no longer a source of conflict but a symbol of peace. Children played there often, and parents watched with smiles. The story of how it had almost been lost but was saved by kindness spread among neighbors, reminding everyone that rules should never be stronger than compassion. As for Tom, he grew more confident. The scrape on his arm faded, but the lessons he learned remained. He discovered that dreams can be tested, but they can also be protected when people stand together. Every time he climbed into his treehouse, he remembered the day the neighborhood rebuilt it, and he whispered softly, "Thank you." And so, the treehouse remained. Not just as a place of play, but as a lasting sign that kindness, courage, and unity will always win over fear and misunderstanding.